The night before my heart transplant, my husband, Noah, brought me a glass of milk at midnight. When I woke up the next day, I found that the heart meant for me had been stolen by my sister, Chloe. The next day, I broke down at the operating room door, demanding to know why. Noah sighed helplessly. Chloe's condition is worse. You still have 3 years to live. Just let her have this heart. My mother frowned, saying I was being unreasonable. Chloe has always compromised for you. As the older sister, you should give in this once. Even my son wouldn't speak up for me. Chloe is afraid of pain, you're not. The heart should go to Chloe. Everyone stood against me. A sharp pain surged in my chest. I had a heart attack and died right there at the operating room door. When I opened my eyes again, I was back to the day before the heart transplant. Your physical condition is fine. The donor heart has been confirmed, and the transplant can proceed tomorrow. Remember to fast and avoid liquids for 10 hours to ensure a smooth operation. Familiar words echoed in my ears again. I opened my eyes, tears streaming down my face, soaking the pillow. My attending physician looked at me and smiled. Evelyn, congratulations. The match rate for this transplant is very high. After the surgery, you'll be healthy. She thought I was crying tears of joy, but only I knew the truth. The agony and despair of finally grasping hope, only for it to be crushed by the very people who were supposed to be my family. The pain of the heart attack still lingered throughout my body, yet I forced a smile. Thank you, doctor. Could I ask you for a favor? Please don't tell my family about tomorrow's surgery yet. I'll sign the consent form myself. Heaven had given me another chance. This time, I would hold on tight and never let go. The doctor nodded understandingly, closed my medical file, and left the room. My roommate, who shared the room with me, looked at me with envy and struck up a conversation. I've been waiting for a suitable donor for almost 7 years. It's so wonderful to see you get to live. Your family must be so happy. I smiled but said nothing. They couldn't possibly be happy, not when their beloved adopted daughter, Chloe, hadn't found a donor yet. Even when I was hospitalized, no one was willing to visit or take care of me. Several times, the pain was so severe that doctors issued a critical condition notice, requiring my family to sign. With trembling hands, I immediately called Noah, but his first words were full of blame. I told you not to call me in the middle of the night. Chloe is a light sleeper. It will wake her up. I curled up on the hospital bed, cold sweat soaking my gown. My voice trembled as I spoke. Noah, I'm in so much pain. The doctor said I might not make it. I want to see you, to see Ethan and Mom and Dad. Please, can you all come to the hospital and see me? But I didn't get his concern. Noah's hushed voice was utterly cold. Stop acting out, Evelyn. You just can't stand us revolving around Chloe. You're faking pain to trick us into visiting you. This is the 5th time. The doctors issued a critical condition notice, and we didn't come to see you, yet you still survived. I blinked, stunned, unable to believe the man I loved most would say such hurtful things. I instinctively began to explain. I'm not lying, Noah. Before I could finish, the phone was snatched away, and my mother, Eleanor's, equally hushed voice came through. Evelyn, I beg you, stop being so dramatic. Her disappointment was so heavy that I could almost picture her tightly furrowed brow, even through the phone. Chloe's heart isn't feeling well today. Do you need to have heart trouble too? Always copying Chloe. Do you really think we can't see through it? Eleanor's voice rose slightly, disturbing Chloe, who let out a mumbled groan. My father, Richard's, muffled voice immediately interjected. What's there to say to Evelyn? Hang up quickly, don't wake Chloe. And just like that, the call was disconnected. I held my phone, feeling a wrenching pain in my heart. I couldn't tell if it was from the words I'd just heard or something else. Just like now, knowing deep down they only cared if Chloe lived a healthy life, I still felt a stinging in my nose from their coldness at the operating room door in my previous life. Your family seems to be here. My roommate's words brought my thoughts back. I turned to the door and saw Mom, Dad, and Noah pushing it open and walking in. Mom's eyes reddened the moment she saw me. She choked up and came forward to hug me. Oh, Evelyn, this is wonderful. You finally got your heart transplant. I'm really so happy to see Evelyn healthy again. Dad held a food container in his hand and smiled as he offered it. Knowing you're having surgery soon, your mother specifically went to the market to buy the freshest chicken and slow-cooked it all day into a rich broth. Eat it quickly to regain your strength. The surgery won't be so hard then. My body stiffened. For a moment, I didn't know what expression to make. Since I was brought back to the George family, my parents had always been indifferent towards me. This was the first time Mom had personally made a meal just for me. I lowered my eyes looking at the chicken broth, but didn't reach for it. Dad didn't seem to mind. He placed the soup on the cabinet and spoke gently. Evelyn, I know you didn't grow up with us and feel a bit distant, but for such a major surgery like a heart transplant, why did you ask the doctor to keep it from us? I clenched my hands, knowing I hadn't managed to hide it from them after all. Noah stepped forward, gently uncurled my hand and rubbed it. Why do you still like to dig your nails into your palm when you're nervous? I'm your husband, of course. I have the duty to sign your surgical consent form. You don't have to worry about troubling me. Looking at their 3 equally gentle smiling faces, I found it hard to breathe. I couldn't help but retort sarcastically. You're all busy looking after Chloe. This little thing doesn't need to be brought to your attention. Their smiles faltered slightly. Then, Noah sighed and gently ruffled my hair. You're still mad at us for not visiting you in the hospital because we were taking care of Chloe, aren't you? It was our oversight. We were wrong. We'll definitely change. He picked up the bowl of soup, blew on it to cool it, and brought it to my lips. This is my earnest effort. It won't taste good if it gets cold. Let me feed you. The surgery was still 15 hours away. Even if I drank this bowl of soup now, it wouldn't affect my transplant tomorrow. They must have known that. My heart fluttered slightly. I couldn't help but wonder if my parents were truly seeing me again. I opened my mouth, then closed it, pushing the bowl away. Mom, thank you for your kindness, but I don't have an appetite right now. Just leave it here for a bit. Bang. As soon as the words left my lips, a small figure kicked open the door. My son, Ethan, burst in like a little cannonball, crying as he spoke to my mother, Eleanor. Grandma, what do we do? Mom won't drink the soup, so Chloe can't get the heart transplant. I don't want Chloe to hurt. Make Mom give the heart to Chloe. What? I stared in shock at the bowl of soup, then snatched the thermos from Dad's hand, stirring frantically. A small blue capsule floated up. I recognized it. It was my long-term anticoagulant medication. But days ago, when the doctor informed me there was a high possibility of a donor heart, I had stopped taking it. All to seize every chance for a heart transplant. If I took this medication before surgery, I might not survive the operation due to a clotting disorder. And the doctors, after comprehensive consideration, would abandon my transplant. Fear crawled all over my heart. I clutched my chest, the pain so intense that a layer of cold sweat seeped from my back. I couldn't take it anymore. I smashed the food container in my hand and roared. Are you trying to kill me? The pain of betrayal from 2 lifetimes combined, tears filled my eyes. I looked mournfully at the few people who were supposed to be the closest in the world to me, choking back sobs as I demanded an answer. Dad, Mom, I'm your daughter, aren't I? Why are you doing this to me? My sudden outburst of smashing things startled Ethan. He flinched, then cried even louder. Bad Mom, you don't hurt at all. Why are you still trying to steal Chloe's heart? I don't want a selfish mom. I only want Chloe. Don't hurt. I mumbled, chewing on those words as if they were shards of glass I couldn't swallow. Looking at this son I had nearly died giving birth to, all my affection for him dissipated like smoke. It was precisely because I was in so much pain during my episodes, my face pale, expression twisted, black hair matted with cold sweat clinging to my cheeks, that I looked so ugly and terrifying. I always worried about scaring my little one, so I never let him see me during an episode. Ethan would sometimes notice something was off. He'd cautiously ask me, Mom, does your heart hurt? I would force a smile and reassure him. No, I don't hurt, Ethan. Don't worry, okay? I told the lie so many times that Ethan actually believed it. And just because I lied about not hurting, he wanted me to give my heart to Chloe. It was utterly ridiculous. I hunched my back, trying to alleviate the pain, and couldn't help but let out a short, self-deprecating laugh. Ethan. I stared straight at him, my voice raspy. If I told you I hurt too, would you still want me to give my heart to Chloe? My heart condition wasn't always this severe, but while waiting for a donor, I unexpectedly found myself pregnant. It was already difficult for me to conceive. The doctor told me that if I aborted this child, I might never have another one. She pointed to the beating heart on the ultrasound for me to see. He's very healthy. I looked at the screen, many thoughts flashing through my mind, yet feeling as if nothing had. But in the end, I touched that beating heart and decided to keep the child. My pregnancy was incredibly difficult. I couldn't move much, and my morning sickness was severe. By the time I carried Ethan to term and gave birth, it had almost killed me. My attending physician immediately came to me, looking serious. Evelyn, you're insane. Because of this child, your heart's lifespan has been shortened by almost 3 years. But looking at the small, soft infant in my arms, I shook my head firmly. Doctor, I don't regret it. At least, not before I died in my previous life. Ethan's tears paused. He bit his lip. Yes, I want Mom to give her heart to Chloe. All my strength seemed to drain away in an instant. I almost lost my balance. I wiped the tears from my face and spoke coldly to the menacing group. You want me to give up my donor heart? Impossible. The atmosphere completely froze. Mom Eleanor, her face grim, spoke with disappointment. Evelyn, ever since you came back to the George family, Chloe has always yielded to you. Haven't you bullied her enough these years? You won't even give up a heart for Chloe. You're truly a greedy person. Noah chimed in. You still have 3 years to live, but Chloe is in so much pain that she can't sleep at night. She's so frail a gust of wind could blow her away. How can your heart be so cruel, watching your sister suffer? But because I gave birth to Ethan, those 3 years I had left were long gone. If I didn't get a heart transplant now, I might die next month, or even tomorrow. My mouth was full of bitterness, but I had no strength left to explain any of this to them. I just closed my eyes and told them to leave. Chloe doesn't deserve to be my sister. If you think I'm heartless, then after the surgery, I can leave the George family and never bother you again. Countless insults immediately erupted, but I didn't take a single word to heart. I called security. Someone is causing a disturbance in the hospital, disrupting normal medical order. Security guards came and escorted them out, and then my ears finally had peace. Exhaustion also washed over me. I closed my eyes and fell into a deep sleep. When I woke up again, a nurse informed me to prepare for surgery. I changed into a surgical gown and lay on the operating table. I was being wheeled to the operating room alone when someone blocked my way. Noah stood at the operating room door, his face grim. Evelyn can't have surgery. She drank milk last night and didn't fast. The head nurse's face instantly changed. She asked me sternly, "Did you secretly eat something?" My face was pale. I shook my head, about to explain. Mom and Dad also stepped forward, bringing a frail-looking Chloe with them. "Doctor, we are her closest family. Of course, we want her to be healthy, but we can't lie. Evelyn drank milk last night. We saw it with our own eyes." They pushed Chloe forward. But Chloe didn't eat anything last night. She needs the same donor heart as Evelyn. For everyone's sake, let Chloe have this transplant. We'll make sure to keep Evelyn in line next time, and not let her eat things she shouldn't. I instantly understood what they meant. There were no cameras in the room. Whether I had eaten or not depended entirely on their word. And once a donor heart is harvested, it's only viable for 3 hours, including air transport time. If I wasted any more time trying to prove I hadn't eaten, this heart would be useless. I gave them a cold glance, my entire heart completely chilled. The head nurse was already hesitating, but I lay calmly on the operating table, unmoving. The operating room door opened, and Dr. Diaz, my attending physician, beckoned to the head nurse. "All right, will Evelyn in?" Noah's face changed. He spoke urgently. "Doctor, she ate something last night, she can't have the surgery." Dr. Diaz looked at them coldly, then tossed something out. "Whether she ate or not, Evelyn already proved it to us. As for you, you're implicated in attempted murder. Get ready to go to jail." The operating room door closed. I saw Mom, Dad, and Noah's faces instantly turn ashen. The heavy double doors of the operating theater swung shut, cutting off the frantic, muffled protests of Noah, Eleanor, and Richard. The sudden silence was absolute, save for the rhythmic, metallic hum of the ventilation system and the soft squeak of the gurney's wheels on the sterile linoleum. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, Evelyn felt she could breathe. Dr. Diaz walked alongside the gurney, her expression grim but resolute. "You did well, Evelyn. Rest now. We have everything we need." "Thank you," Evelyn whispered. Her voice was barely a rasp, her throat dry from the strict fast she had rigorously observed. 2 hours before she was wheeled out, anticipating Noah's final desperate attempt to sabotage her surgery, Evelyn had requested a gastric ultrasound. She had stood firm as the cold gel was applied to her abdomen, watching the monitor. As the technician confirmed her stomach was entirely empty, devoid of the milk Noah had tried to force upon her at midnight, and devoid of the drugged chicken broth Eleanor had brewed. More than that, the moment she had smashed the thermos of soup on the floor, the head nurse had preserved the spill. The shattered glass and the dark, fragrant broth containing the partially dissolved blue capsule of warfarin had been swept into sterile biohazard bags and sent straight to the hospital's forensic toxicology lab. Evelyn closed her eyes as the anesthesiologist placed the oxygen mask over her face. The scent of rubber and clean, cold air filled her lungs. Let them scream, she thought as the darkness pulled her under. Let them rage. For the first time, I am choosing myself. The surgery lasted 5 hours and 42 minutes. Inside the chest cavity, Evelyn's diseased, swollen heart, scarred by the physical toll of her high-risk pregnancy and years of neglected chronic illness, was carefully excised. In its place, the donor heart, pristine and perfectly matched, was sutured into the waiting vessels. When the clamps were removed, the new heart didn't hesitate. It quivered once, then surged into a steady, powerful, rhythmic beat. Thump-thump, thump-thump. It was the sound of a future. When Evelyn opened her eyes, the world was a blur of soft, green fluorescent lights and the rhythmic, reassuring beep of an ICU monitor. A sharp, tight sensation pulled at her sternum, but it was a clean pain, the pain of healing, not the suffocating, crushing weight of a failing heart. She inhaled deeply, expecting the usual sharp spasm of angina, but found only the cold, refreshing flow of oxygen through her nasal cannula. "Evelyn?" Can you hear me? She turned her head slowly. Dr. Diaz was standing by her bedside, checking for drips. Her eyes were warm, though her face carried the exhaustion of a long night. I'm alive, Evelyn croaked, her throat dry. Very much so, Dr. Diaz smiled gently, offering her a tiny sip of water through a straw. The new heart is working beautifully. Your blood pressure is stable, and your oxygen saturation is at 99%. You've crossed the hardest bridge. Evelyn swallowed the water, the cool liquid soothing her throat. My family. Where are they? Dr. Diaz's smile faded, replaced by a stern, professional gravity. The police took them into custody yesterday afternoon, shortly after you went into surgery. The toxicology report came back. The broth your mother brought contained a lethal concentration of a high-dose anticoagulant. Had you consumed it, you would have suffered uncontrollable internal bleeding during the sternotomy. You wouldn't have made it off the table. Evelyn's chest tightened, not from illness, but from the raw, cold reality of her mother's malice. And the milk. We analyzed the residue in the glass your roommate pointed out to us, Dr. Diaz said. Your husband had dissolved a fast-acting sedative in it. Had you drunk it, they would have claimed you were mentally unresponsive or unstable, using your sleep to sign the refusal forms on your behalf, or simply delaying the surgery until the donor heart expired. They planned this down to the minute. Evelyn stared at the ceiling. In her previous life, she had died in the hallway, suffocated by her own despair and the physical collapse of her heart. This time, she had turned their weapons into the very evidence that would destroy them. There is a Detective Miller waiting outside, Dr. Diaz added softly. He has been very patient. He wants to know if you are strong enough to give a statement. Evelyn took a deep breath, feeling the steady, powerful throb of her new heart. Tell him to come in. I've waited 2 lifetimes to speak. The police station's interrogation room was cold, smelling faintly of stale coffee and old paper. Noah sat with his head in his hands, his wedding ring catching the harsh overhead light. Opposite him, Detective Miller tossed a thick folder onto the metal table. You have a lot of explaining to do, Mr. George, Miller said, his voice level and dry. We have the toxicology reports, the hospital's security footage, and a very detailed statement from your wife's attending physician. Noah looked up, his face pale and eyes bloodshot. You don't understand. Evelyn was going to die anyway. The doctors said she only had 3 years. But Chloe is young, she's fragile. She has her whole life ahead of her. We weren't trying to hurt Evelyn. We just wanted to save Chloe. So you decided to drug your wife with sedatives to sabotage her surgery, and her mother slipped a lethal dose of blood thinners into her food. Miller leaned forward, his eyes drilling into Noah. That's not medical triage, Mr. George. That is conspiracy to commit murder. No, the broth was just to make her slightly ill so the doctors would postpone it. Noah cried out, his voice cracking. We didn't know the dose was that high. Eleanor she was desperate. We were all desperate. Desperation doesn't excuse a premeditated attempt on a human life, Miller said coldly. And what about the lies you told the surgical staff, claiming she had eaten, trying to force the hospital to discard a life-saving organ? You knew that once the heart was rejected for Evelyn, your sister-in-law, Chloe, was the next compatible recipient on the local emergency list. You tried to steal a heart by murdering the rightful recipient. In the adjacent room, Eleanor and Richard were being questioned separately. Eleanor was weeping hysterically, clutching her chest and claiming her own heart was failing from the stress. I am her mother, Eleanor screamed at the female officer recording her statement. How dare you accuse me of trying to kill my own daughter? I brought her back to this family. I gave her everything. She's always been jealous of Chloe. She's selfish, stubborn. She wanted Chloe to die. Richard sat in silent horror, realizing for the first time that his career, his reputation, and his freedom were gone. He looked at his hands, remembering how he had stood by and watched Eleanor grind the pills into the broth, convincing himself it was for the greater good of the family. There was no greater good left. There was only the cold, hard reality of a prison cell. 3 weeks later, Evelyn was transferred to a private rehabilitation wing. Her recovery was nothing short of miraculous. Without the toxic stress of her family, and with the constant care of Dr. Diaz, her body healed rapidly. She could walk down the hallway without losing her breath. She could look in the mirror and see color in her cheeks instead of the ghostly gray that had haunted her for a decade. One afternoon, the nurse knocked on her door. Evelyn, there's a young boy here who claims to be your son. He's accompanied by a social worker. Do you want to see him? Evelyn's hand paused over her book. Ethan, the son she had nearly died to bring into the world. The son who in her past life had stood by Chloe's side and told her that she was not afraid of pain and should give up her life. "Let them in," Evelyn said quietly. The door opened and 7-year-old Ethan walked in. He looked smaller than she remembered, his clothes slightly disheveled, his eyes wide and red from crying. Behind him stood a polite, professional social worker from Child Protective Services. "Mommy," Ethan whimpered, taking a step toward the bed. Evelyn did not open her arms. She sat propped up against her pillows, her expression calm, detached and unreadable. "Hello, Ethan," she said. Ethan flinched at the lack of warmth in her voice. He had been used to a mother who would immediately drop to her knees, pull him into a tight embrace, and apologize for whatever had made him sad, even when it wasn't her fault. "Mommy, why are you here? Why won't you come home?" Ethan sobbed, fat tears rolling down his cheeks. "Grandma and Grandpa are gone. Daddy is in a bad place. They won't let me see them. Chloe is in the hospital crying every day. Why are you being so mean to everyone?" The social worker looked uncomfortable but remained silent, observing the interaction. Evelyn looked at her son. She felt a faint, dull ache in her chest, but it was the ghost of an old wound, not a fresh one. The fierce, blinding maternal instinct that had once governed her entire existence had been burned away in the fire of his betrayal. "Ethan," Evelyn said, her voice steady and clear. "Do you remember what you told me the day before my surgery?" Ethan sniffed, rubbing his nose with his sleeve. I don't know. You told me that I don't feel pain, and that I should give my heart to Chloe, because she is afraid of it," Evelyn reminded him, her words dropping like ice cubes into a glass. "You told me you didn't want a selfish mom, and that you only wanted Chloe." I was just worried about Auntie Chloe," Ethan cried, looking panicky. "She was crying, and she said if she didn't get the heart, she would go to heaven." "I didn't want her to go to heaven." "And what about me, Ethan?" Evelyn asked. "If I gave her my heart, where would I go?" Ethan lowered his head, his small shoulders shaking. He didn't answer. He was old enough to understand the concept of death, but he had been conditioned by Noah and Eleanor to believe that his mother was an unbreakable, secondary character in Chloe's grand tragedy. Her life didn't carry the same value. "Your father, your grandparents, and your aunt told you that my life was worth less than Chloe's," Evelyn said softly. "And you believed them. You chose them." "Mommy, I'm sorry." Ethan rushed to the side of the bed, trying to grab her hand. "I love you. I want to go home with you." Evelyn gently but firmly pulled her hand away, placing it over her own chest, where her new heart beat strong and steady. "I am divorcing your father, Ethan. And I am severing all ties with the George family," Evelyn said. "Because of what your father and grandparents did, they will be going to prison for a very long time. You will not be living with them." Are we going to live together?" Ethan asked, his eyes lighting up with a desperate hope. "No," Evelyn said. The social worker gasped slightly, but Evelyn kept her gaze fixed on the boy. "I nearly died giving birth to you, Ethan. I shortened my own life so you could have yours. And in return, you asked me to die so your aunt could live comfortably," Evelyn said, her voice devoid of anger, containing only a profound, absolute finality. "I cannot be your mother anymore. The love I had for you is buried with my old heart." "Mommy, no, you can't do that," Ethan screamed, throwing a tantrum, grabbing at her blankets. "You're my mom. You have to take care of me. The court has already initiated the process," Evelyn said, looking at the social worker. "I have officially waived my parental rights. Since his father is facing attempted murder charges and his maternal grandparents are co-conspirators, he will be placed in the custody of the state or his paternal aunt in another city. Please take him out." The social worker stepped forward, gently but firmly pulling the screaming, thrashing boy away. "Come on, Ethan. Let's go." "Mommy. I'm sorry. Mommy. I want my mommy." His screams echoed down the hallway, fading slowly until the heavy door clicked shut, leaving Evelyn in the quiet, sunlit room. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. A single tear slipped down her cheek, but she did not wipe it away. It was the last tear she would ever shed for the family she had lost. The legal system moved with a cold, grinding precision. The trial of the state versus Noah George, Eleanor George, and Richard George became a public sensation. The media caught wind of the story. The biological daughter left to rot while the wealthy, prominent George family attempted to murder her to harvest her heart for their adopted daughter. The public backlash was swift and brutal. Richard's engineering firm plummeted in value overnight as clients severed contracts to avoid association with a family of attempted murderers. Their assets were frozen, their savings drained by mounting legal fees. Chloe, stripped of her family's financial protection and the illusion of her own innocence, was forced to leave the private hospital wing because her family had attempted to manipulate the donor list through criminal acts. The National Transplant Registry launched an investigation under the strict ethical guidelines of the United Network for Organ Sharing. UNOS, candidates whose families attempt to secure organs through coercion, bribery, or violence are subject to immediate disqualification. Chloe was permanently removed from the priority transplant list. On the day of the sentencing, Evelyn sat in the public gallery, wearing a simple, elegant cream-colored suit. She looked radiant, her skin glowing with health, her posture straight and confident. Noah was brought in first, handcuffed and wearing an orange jumpsuit. He had lost weight, his face sunken and his eyes hollow. When he saw Evelyn sitting in the gallery, his eyes flared with a desperate, pathetic hope. "Evelyn, please," he called out before the bailiff forced him into his seat. "Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them we're still a family." Evelyn didn't even blink. She watched him as if he were a stranger on a subway. The judge, a stern woman with decades of experience, did not show any mercy. The defendants acted with a terrifying level of calculation, the judge declared, her voice echoing through the courtroom. To take advantage of a dying woman's trust, to attempt to drug her, and to slip lethal substances into her food, all to bypass the ethical boundaries of medical science for your own selfish desires. This is a crime that strikes at the very heart of human decency. Noah George was sentenced to 15 years in a state penitentiary for conspiracy to commit murder and medical endangerment. Eleanor George, despite her theatrical fainting spells and claims of poor health, was sentenced to 12 years. Richard George, for his complicity and failure to prevent the crime, was sentenced to 8 years. As Eleanor was led away in handcuffs, she caught sight of Evelyn, her face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. "You monster!" Eleanor shrieked, struggling against the guards. "You destroyed this family. You stole Chloe's life. I regret the day I ever brought you back from that orphanage. You should have died there." Evelyn stood up slowly. She walked toward the railing, looking down at the woman who had given her birth but never a mother's love. "You didn't bring me back to be your daughter, Eleanor," Evelyn said, her voice carrying clearly through the quiet courtroom. "You brought me back to be a spare parts bin for Chloe. But the spare parts belong to me now, and I am going to live." Eleanor was dragged out, her screams fading into the holding cells below. 2 years later, the small coastal town of Monterey was quiet, smelling of salt water, pine needles, and fresh rain. A small cottage sat on the cliffs overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Its garden was wild but beautiful, filled with blue hydrangeas, white roses, and rosemary bushes that caught the ocean breeze. Evelyn sat on the wooden deck, a mug of warm herbal tea in her hands. She wore a soft knit sweater, her long black hair tied back loosely. Her face was calm, free of the lines of worry and physical pain that had once defined her youth. Inside the cottage, the soft, melodious sound of a piano drifted through the open window. She had taken up music again, a passion she had abandoned when her illness had made her fingers too weak to press the keys. Her phone buzzed on the table. It was an email from her lawyer confirming the final liquidation of the George family assets. After their criminal convictions and the subsequent civil lawsuits Evelyn had filed for medical battery and emotional distress, their estate had been entirely dismantled. Chloe had been forced to move into a state-run care facility. Without the expensive private treatments and the stolen heart she had felt entitled to, her condition had deteriorated. She was now bedridden, living out her days in the very obscurity she had spent her life trying to avoid. Noah's sister had taken custody of Ethan, moving him to a small town in the Midwest. Evelyn's lawyer noted that the boy was in therapy, slowly adjusting to a life where he was no longer the center of a wealthy, toxic universe. Evelyn read the report, then closed the email. She felt no joy in their suffering, but she felt no pity either. It was simply the natural law of cause and effect. They had sown seeds of cruelty, and they had harvested the bitter fruit. She stood up, walking down the wooden steps of her deck to the sandy path that led to the beach. The sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the sky in brilliant shades of amber, violet, and deep, burning crimson. The waves crashed against the rocks. Below, a powerful, eternal rhythm. Evelyn placed her hand over her chest. Underneath her palm, the heart of an unknown donor, a stranger who had given her the ultimate gift of life, beat with a steady, magnificent strength. Thump thump, thump thump. She took a deep, clean breath of the salty ocean air, smiled at the horizon and walked forward into her new life.